Story 1. He always knew when I was about to cry and left notes before it happened. This happened to me in 2017 when I was living in a small town just outside of Madison, Wisconsin. I'd just gone through a breakup and had moved into a studio apartment above a thrift store downtown. It was one of those places with thin walls and radiator pipes that made knocking sounds in the middle of the night. I worked as a customer service rep at a call center a few blocks away, and I walked there most mornings. It wasn't a bad life, lonely, but stable. I liked the routine of it. Same walk, same chair, same lunch break. I'd listen to music or podcasts, take a hot bath after work, journal a little before bed. I've always been the kind of person who prefers quiet over company. The first time it happened, I thought it was a joke. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had cried the night before, quietly in the bath, not because of anything in particular, but because I felt this cold ache behind my ribs that hadn't left since the move. When I got home the next day, there was a piece of paper slid under my door. It said, "You're not as alone as you feel, but I know that's not the same." No name, no handwriting I recognized. It was printed, centered neatly on plain white paper. I froze. My first instinct was that someone had dropped it off by mistake. That was the easiest explanation, but I couldn't shake the way the words matched the exact thing I'd been thinking. I threw it away and went about my night. A week later, it happened again. Different note. "You were right to cry. That memory does hurt." This time, I hadn't even cried yet. That night, I did, not out of sadness, out of something I didn't have a word for, a kind of violated confusion. Like something invisible had leaned close and whispered from just behind me. I told myself it was just a strange coincidence, that I'd probably told someone at work something personal and they were playing a sick joke, but I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. Over the next month, the notes came more frequently, always on plain paper, always printed. Sometimes they were left under my door, once inside the locked mailbox that only I had a key for. Another time, tucked inside a book I'd left open on the coffee table, a book I'd been reading the night before when I broke down. I kept all the notes in a shoebox, trying to track a pattern, but there wasn't one, not in the delivery. The pattern was in me. Every note landed within hours of an emotional episode, but it wasn't random. They always arrived before the breakdown, like he could see it coming before I did. There was one I remember clearly because of how surgical it felt. I'd woken up from a dream. I don't remember what it was, only that I woke up crying, and the note on my windowsill that morning said, "You did everything you could. That's what makes it harder." He knew, not just that I was sad. He knew the precise texture of it. He knew I'd been blaming myself. He knew the sentences I was too ashamed to say out loud. I stopped journaling. I unplugged my phone when I got home. I covered the windows with tape and brown paper. Nothing helped. The notes didn't stop. After nearly 2 months of this, I had a theory. It was a bad one, but it gave me something to focus on. What if the stalker was accessing my journal? I hadn't written in it for weeks, but maybe that's how he'd started. So I decided to trap him. I took out a fresh notebook and began writing deliberately false entries. I made up entire emotional patterns, said I was grieving a childhood pet, claimed I was angry at a sibling I don't have. I described dreams I'd never had, heartbreaks that weren't real, confessions I'd never whispered, all in this new notebook. I did this for 7 straight days. On the 8th day, there was a note. I almost laughed when I saw it, tucked neatly into my coat pocket while I was at work. It read, "That's not your handwriting." I dropped the paper right there on the call center floor. Something in my spine shifted, like the structure of my fear had changed. This wasn't just someone watching me. This was someone who knew me well enough to know when I was pretending. I stopped writing entirely. I even started leaving lights on in my apartment when I wasn't home, hoping the unpredictability would throw him off. I bought a cheap nanny cam and pointed it at the front door, but the feed was always clean. Then I tried pretending I didn't care. I stopped reacting to the notes. I didn't cry when they came. I didn't acknowledge them. I ignored them for 2 weeks straight. The longer I pretended not to feel, the more erratic the notes became. They started showing up in impossible places, inside the dryer vent, folded between stacked dishes, taped to the underside of my shampoo bottle. One night, I came home to find one inside the microwave, a place I never opened unless I was heating something up. That note said, "You haven't cooked all week, you should eat." My chest clenched, because he wasn't guessing. He wasn't watching from the outside. He was living in the rhythm of my life like it was his own. I stopped sleeping. I developed a tremor in my hands. I couldn't work. I started whispering out loud, just to hear a voice other than my own. The silence had begun to feel like another person. The final straw was when my mum came to visit. I hadn't told her anything. I didn't want to worry her. She stayed the night, and the next morning I found a note inside her purse. It said, "She thinks you're doing better. Don't disappoint her." After my mum left, I packed up everything I owned and moved within a week. I didn't tell anyone the new address. I deleted all social media. I changed my phone number. I didn't even forward my mail. I took a cashier job in a different city and told everyone I was taking time off to recalibrate. I found a small sublet above a laundromat. The walls were thicker. There were no vents big enough to hide anything. The building had keycard access. My windows faced a brick wall. It felt safe. For a while, it even felt peaceful. I started reading again. I watched movies. I forced myself to believe it was over, that I had somehow imagined more of it than was real, that maybe I'd had a breakdown and the notes were the product of someone taking advantage of a frayed mental state. But then I started reading articles, academic ones. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to feel like there was a framework for what had happened. Something called anticipatory intimacy kept coming up. It's a theory in psychology. The idea that certain stalkers don't just observe, they map. They learn the internal mechanics of a person. Not just habits, but pre-emotional cues. The rise in breathing before a panic attack. The way someone touches their face before they cry. The length of silences after a triggering phrase. Hyper-personal mimicry. Preemptive responses. Rehearsed affection. It's not surveillance. It's psychological mirroring so acute it starts to feel spiritual. That was what he had been doing. And maybe he hadn't even needed access to my apartment. Maybe he'd only needed time. I spent a full month in the new place before I let myself believe it had worked. I'd even gotten to the point where I was sleeping with the lights off again. Then, on my first night off in the new apartment, I went to open the drawer under the kitchen sink. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I just opened it out of habit. There was a note inside. White paper. Same font. 4 words. "You almost fooled me." Story 2. I saw myself watching me, but I was already inside the house. This happened to me in late 2018 when I was living in a 1-story rental house just outside of Tacoma, Washington. I just turned 31, recently divorced, and needed a clean break from everything familiar. I found a small place at the end of a gravel road. No neighbors within view, nothing but wet pine and mud out back. It was what I wanted. Quiet, detached. The house had an old glass sliding door that looked out onto the woods, the kind with a foggy reflection at night when the kitchen light was on. I used to find comfort in that, seeing myself move around the kitchen, hearing the soft roll of the microwave or the low hum of the fridge. Small, predictable rhythms, but it was that same reflection where I saw it the first time. It was subtle. I'd just walked into the kitchen to heat something up. The glass reflected my movement, but something was off. I didn't notice it at first, just a flicker of wrongness, like a frame was missing. I opened the fridge. My reflection did too, but a second too late. Not long, maybe half a second, maybe less. But not nothing. I stood still, closed the door, watched the movement happen again. Delayed. My hand twitched. Then the reflection twitched. But I hadn't moved that time. I remember turning around quickly, looking behind me like I expected someone to be there. But it was just the empty kitchen, Same linoleum floor, same cracked overhead light, same silence. I told myself it was fatigue, or eye strain, or a trick of the condensation on the glass, and I left it at that. The next night, it happened again. I was brushing my teeth. The bathroom mirror steamed slightly from the shower I'd just taken. I leaned forward to spit and caught it again. The reflection leaning forward too, but it didn't spit. It just looked at me, mouth closed. Still. I froze. My toothbrush was still in my hand. The sound of water dripping from the faucet was the only thing I could hear. I blinked. The reflection blinked back, but the timing was wrong again. This wasn't just a delay, it was intention. Something about the way it held its gaze, not passive, not a copy. It was like it was waiting. I backed away from the mirror, turned off the light, left the bathroom door open. By the end of that week, I'd covered every reflective surface in the house, mirrors, windows, even the microwave door. It didn't help. Soon, the reflections stopped needing mirrors. I started seeing them in shadows, in the rear window of my car, in the gloss of a puddle outside my door. And they weren't all the same. Sometimes the reflection would smile when I wasn't, or hold an object I didn't remember picking up. Once I swear I saw myself scratching my arm, but I wasn't itchy. The worst part, they always looked exactly like me. Same clothes, same posture, but a moment behind, a half second too slow, and always watching. I started sleeping with noise-canceling headphones, not because of sound, but because I couldn't handle the silence anymore. It was like every quiet moment held a breath I hadn't taken yet, and I didn't know who it belonged to. A friend of mine, a former roommate from college, suggested something half-jokingly over text. "Record yourself sleeping," he said. "Might help prove you're not nuts." I didn't find it funny, but I did it. I downloaded a voice-activated recording app and left my phone charging on the nightstand. No headphones, no TV. I lay completely still that night, forcing my eyes closed while every part of me braced for nothing. When I woke up, I didn't listen right away. I made coffee first, took a long shower, pushed it off like it was a call I didn't want to make. Then I sat down on the edge of the bed, opened the file, and hit play. The first few minutes were normal. Inhale, exhale, the rustle of sheets. Then I heard something that wasn't mine. A second set of breaths, heavier, closer. They didn't match mine. They lagged slightly behind, but not by much. Less than a second. The rhythm of it was wrong. I'd breathe in. Then, half a beat later, it would too. I turned up the volume, leaned closer to the phone. At the 27-minute mark, there was a small click, like the sound of the closet door opening. I checked the timestamp, 2:43 a.m. I remembered waking up at 2:44, thinking I heard something. I hadn't checked, just assumed it was the heater. Then the breathing got louder, closer. There was a creak. The floorboard next to the bed. That one always creaks. You have to step on it to get to the side I sleep on. Then a whisper, just one sentence. "We're back in sync." I dropped the phone, knocked over my coffee. It spilled across the rug and soaked through the recording. I tried listening again. The app froze. When I rebooted it, the file was gone. I hadn't deleted it. I hadn't even backed it up, but it was just gone. That night, I left the phone recording again. The next morning, I woke up to find the phone powered off, battery dead, but I'd left it plugged in. When I turned it back on, there was a new voice memo already saved. It was only 6 seconds long. I hit play, my own voice whispering, "Why are you pretending you don't remember this?" I stopped talking to friends after that. It wasn't paranoia. It was exhaustion. Trying to explain what was happening made it worse. The looks they gave me, concern, sympathy, suspicion, none of them helped, none of them made it stop. So I stopped explaining, and I left. I took a month of unpaid leave and drove upstate. Found a temporary cabin near the Columbia River, deep enough into the woods that there was no service, no Wi-Fi, no mirrors. I unplugged the fridge and turned off the breakers to the bathroom light. I even covered the pond behind the cabin with a tarp I found in the shed. I didn't want to see myself. I brought books, paper maps, a manual crank radio. I didn't want to be alone. I needed to be. I read a lot, slept on the floor, wrote notes by hand and burned them every morning. Days passed, then a week, then almost 2, and for the first time in months I didn't see him. No shadows, no reflections, no notes, just silence. Until the morning of the 12th day. I woke up to something cold touching my feet. Not a draft, not the floor. It was paper, a photograph. I sat up slowly, heart already pounding before I'd fully opened my eyes. The photo showed me, asleep, in the exact position I had just been in, taken from directly above. No shadows, no glare. Clear, full resolution. I checked the back of the photo, written in pencil, June 3rd, 2025. That was tomorrow. I stayed up the whole next night. I didn't blink. I didn't move. I kept the lights on, sat with my back to the wall. The photo was still in my lap when the sun came up. The next morning I found another one. Same photo, same angle, same date. Except this time I was smiling, and the figure in the corner, just barely visible in the doorway, wasn't me. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. She wasn't following me. She was always already there. This happened to me in 2020 when the world had already started to feel unreal. I was working remotely out of my childhood home after my dad passed away. My sister was trying to sell the place, but until then, it was just me in the house we grew up in. The house was old, not haunted, not eerie, just aged. Creaks in the stairs, a furnace that breathed too loud, windows that stuck when you opened them. But it wasn't a scary place. Not until I started watching the tapes. It began with a box I found in the basement, labeled Memories in my dad's blocky handwriting. Inside were old VHS cassettes, Christmas mornings, soccer games, birthdays, graduation, stuff we hadn't looked at in years. I was feeling sentimental, so I brought a few up, found the old VHS player, and started digitizing them one by one. It became part of my nighttime routine. After work, I'd eat dinner, maybe read, then throw on a tape and let it play as I lay on the couch. It was calming, for a while. The first time I noticed her, it was in a Christmas tape. I was maybe 6, sitting cross-legged, opening some action figure I don't remember. My mom was behind the camera laughing. My sister ran past in the background, and behind her, through the open kitchen doorway, a woman stood, pale, unsmiling, still. I paused the tape. She wasn't part of the family. Not a relative, not a friend. She wasn't moving. She was just watching. I thought maybe it was a trick of the light, a reflection, an aunt I'd forgotten. But something about her face was wrong. It didn't match the tone of the memory. I zoomed in digitally, couldn't make out the features well, but her eyes were facing the camera, not looking at the kids, not at my mom, at me. I chalked it up to a fluke, until I saw her again, this time in a tape labeled School Grad. It was my 5th grade graduation. I was walking across a gymnasium stage, shaking hands with the principal, doing that awkward kid smile. As I stepped down, the camera panned across the crowd of clapping parents, and there she was, again, far in the back row, standing while everyone else sat, wearing the same pale dress, same unmoving expression. This time, her head turned as the camera passed, slow and deliberate, following the lens. Following me. I paused, rewound. Watched it 3 more times. Each time her face was clearer, older than me, not ancient, maybe mid-30s, not sad, not smiling, just there. I told myself maybe it was a teacher or a school volunteer, but deep down I already knew better, because the next night I found her again, this time in footage from the family camping trip when I was 9. We're all laughing around the fire. My dad is telling a story. The camera pans over the trees, the moonlight flickering on branches. And between 2 trees, in the distance, a shape, closer than she should have been. Same pale figure, standing behind the firelight just out of reach, watching, not following. She was already there. After the third or fourth tape, I stopped sleeping properly. Every time I closed my eyes, she was there, but not chasing me, not even moving, just present, like a constant backdrop. In the dreams, I wasn't a kid. I was me now, lying in the same house, walking the same halls. But things were wrong. The rooms were slightly darker than they should be. My voice didn't sound right. The air felt heavier, as if I was remembering a dream someone else had once. The first time she spoke, it was from the chair in my childhood bedroom. I was dreaming. I knew that. But the dream felt layered, like something was remembering itself inside me. I asked her, "Why are you in the tapes?" She tilted her head and said calmly, "You made me when you were afraid of being alone." Her voice wasn't harsh. It wasn't a threat. It was worse. It was patient, like she'd been waiting for me to finally realize she was never gone, that she was never not here, only unnoticed. I started dreaming in her presence almost every night. Sometimes she'd stand at the foot of the bed. Other times, she'd be seated in the kitchen, flipping through a photo album I didn't recognize. Pages I'd never seen. Faces that felt familiar, but didn't have names. One night, I watched myself sleep. From the corner of the ceiling, like I was the camera, I saw my own chest rise and fall. I heard the distant sound of a VHS rewinding, and then her hand entered the frame, just her hand, reaching toward my sleeping face. The frame cut to black. I woke up, gasping. That morning, I opened the bottom drawer of the living room cabinet, a place I hadn't touched since moving back. Inside was a single photograph. Me, lying on the couch. Last night's clothes, taken from above. Same angle as the dream. Nothing written on the back, just left there. I stopped watching the tapes. I sealed the box and took it to the garage. But the dreams didn't stop. Now, in the dreams, she wasn't just present. She was guiding me through unfamiliar houses, through dark, narrow stairwells, through doors that shouldn't have existed in the floor plan of my real home. I followed her, not because I wanted to, but because I already knew the way. I moved out a few weeks later, sold the house at a loss. Didn't tell my sister why. I just said I needed a new environment, found a third-floor apartment in a crowded building in Portland. Lots of noise, streetlight outside the window, people above, below, and on both sides. I wanted proximity. I wanted noise. I wanted anything that reminded me I was awake. For a while, it worked. The dreams faded. The woman, the presence, didn't appear in reflections. There were no photographs, no whispering, just a regular life. I started dating someone. I started sleeping through the night. I didn't bring any of the tapes, didn't keep a single photo from childhood. I tried to believe she was something I'd created, not literally, but emotionally. A ghost built out of grief, a fear-shaped artifact. I even found a paper online about emotive residue entities, a theory that said some hauntings aren't ghosts at all, that they're formed by the compounding weight of suppressed memory, that when you push loneliness down for long enough, it doesn't disappear, it condenses, and eventually it becomes something, an echo with form, a watcher born not from what we fear, but from what we abandoned. That theory helped me sleep until the day I was walking downtown. Just a regular Saturday, coffee in hand, AirPods in, noise all around me. A woman passed by on the sidewalk, headed in the opposite direction. We didn't make eye contact. She didn't stop. But as she brushed past me, she whispered, "She misses being remembered." I stopped cold, spun around. She was already gone. The street was crowded, dozens of people, faces I didn't know, but none of them were her. When I got home, I opened my email. There was one unread message, no subject, no sender. The body was blank, but attached was a photo of me, sitting in that very moment, reading the message. Behind me, just barely in frame, she stood in the hallway. No expression, no threat. Just watching, like she always had.